What happens when one of the most successful pilots of all time meets absolute silence? Just when you need answers. Can a 6-second pause decide a result in Formula One? What happened in Azerbaijan with Lewis Hamilton could be the beginning of a crisis in Ferrari. What happened in Baku raises a bigger question. Can Ferrari adapt to Lewis's way of working before it's too late? Because if something was clear, it is not enough to have a competitive car or a legendary name in the garage. Modern Formula One demands synchrony, precision, and mutual trust. The Azerbaijan street circuit is one of the most complex scenarios in the calendar. Its mixture of long straight and extreme braking in areas of low adhesion forces a perfect balance between aerodynamic efficiency, braking stability, and thermal management of pneumatic. Ferrari, however, arrived with a car that was not prepared for that challenge. One of the most serious problems was the overshoot of the tires during the lines. In a modern Formula One car, compounds must be maintained inside a very specific thermal range to offer proper grip. Below that threshold, the tire loses flexibility and therefore traction and adhesion. What happened in the SF25 was clear. When it reached the braking areas after the lines, the front tires were cold. Too cold. And that caused the car not to stop accurately, that it skills slightly and lost valuable hundredths back after return. Charles Leclerc was the first to report this trend. Especially in curves 1 and 3, where a long time was lost at the entrance, just when the car needed maximum stability. But Hamilton was not exempt. Although he opted for a different driving strategy prioritizing the speed at the apex of the curves, he also faced limitations. His approach, although effective in medium and fast curves, punished traction at the exit of the slower curves. The SF25 simply failed to maintain an optimal temperature window for its compounds for enough time. It was like trying to refine a piano in the middle of a storm. And the problem was not just thermal. The SF25 aerodynamic configuration in Baku was another decisive factor. Ferrari opted for a front wing trimmed at its side ends, seeking to reduce the drag and gain peak speed. However, this modification affected the consistency of the airflow towards the flat bottom and diffuser, which caused instability in braking and a lower front aerodynamic load. Worse, in the back, the Italian team tested two different aileron versions, one more aggressive and a more balanced one, without reaching a clear conclusion until the last moment. This type of indecision compromises all the work of tuning of the weekend. The most alarming thing was that, while other teams such as McLaren or Mercedes arrived with clear configurations and defined objectives, Ferrari was still experimenting with basic configurations during the FP3 and the same Saturday of classification. This, added to the lack of confidence in the balance of the car, left the pilots in a reactive position without real ability to attack. When a car demands such extreme pilot adjustments to function on a specific track, that is not versatility, it is vulnerability. And if that car does not communicate well with the pilot, as was the case with Hamilton, then the entire set loses its competitive capacity. The SF25 in theory should be a step forward with respect to the previous model. In practice, Baku explained that it continues to drag structural problems that are not solved only with new ailerons or motor maps. The root is in Ferrari's inability to integrate coherent technical solutions with a clear and unified work philosophy. The car can be fast in certain circuits, but as long as it continues to react as fragile to conditions such as Azerbaijan, it will not be a reliable tool to fight a championship. And that knows Hamilton. He knew when entering curve with cold tires. He confirmed it when losing grip in each braking. And he finished understanding when his 8th place did not reflect his effort or his capacity, but the limitations of a car that, like him, still does not find his place in Ferrari. In Formula One, the value of a team order goes far beyond telling a pilot to let your partner pass. It is, in essence, a strategic statement. A clear vision of how to maximize collective performance based on circumstances. However, in Ferrari that clarity remains a mirage. What happened with Lewis Hamilton at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix was not just an operational omission. It was a lost opportunity to act with forcefulness, a leadership vacuum that, in practice, cost positions, points, and perhaps the most important, trust. During the race, there was a critical moment that should be resolved firmly from the box's wall. Rhythm management between Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton. Both were trapped in a low-rhythm train, without being able to advance in front of a group of pilots who maintained a solid defensive rhythm. In those circumstances, Ferrari had two clear options. Or allow the pilot faster at that time according to internal telemetry to take the lead to try to break the train, or protect the position of the pilot who led the pair. What Ferrari did was the worst thing a team can do on that stage, not decide. The lack of an explicit order to reorder positions between Hamilton and Leclerc was not an act of neutrality, it was a resignation to compete. And not only did he trap Hamilton in an unfast sequence of laps, but also sacrificed any joint attack attempt. The 44 car showed a better rhythm in that middle section of the race, with less degradation and better sector times at the exit of slow curves. But without the clean space ahead, those strengths were useless. In parallel, the most striking thing is that Ferrari has not hesitated in the past to issue orders in much less critical circumstances. Already in 2024, in several races, they prioritized conservative decisions to maintain positions, even if that meant giving up attacking the immediate rival. Internal culture remains inclined towards the protection of Leclerc as a natural reference of the project. And although that can have logic from technical continuity, it becomes a problem when it compromises the competitiveness of another top-level pilot. Hamilton does not need to be the political leader of the team. He said it before. But it does need an environment where decisions are made with clarity and coherence. In Mercedes, even in years of crisis, the wall was proactive. The orders arrived with technical foundation. The pilot knew that even if they did not favor him, they were backed by a logical criterion. In Ferrari, that logic seems to be diluted in the midst of internal protocols, fear of media consequences, and the eternal indecision of a team that has been the victim of its own doubts for more than a decade. And while in Baku it was not an explicit order that harmed Hamilton, the damage was the same: silence again. A pattern that was repeated both in classification and in the race. Where there should be a clear instruction, there was ambiguity. Where there should be leadership, there was hesitation. It is there where the concept of equipment order ceases to be a simple tactical issue and becomes a project thermometer. When a team does not dare to make decisions that could generate internal tensions, it ends up renouncing to compete with intelligence. And that, in a calendar where each point counts, is unacceptable. Hamilton does not need privileges, but he does need direction. A structure capable of aligning technical performance with the track strategy. Without that, his presence in Ferrari runs the risk of becoming a succession of silent frustrations, instead of a glorious stage as many imagined. The question is no longer whether Ferrari has the car to compete. The question is whether you have the courage to make the necessary decisions when it matters most. Because the orders that never arrived in Baku could be the first chapter of a story that is repeated. And if the course does not change, the outcome will be the same as always. Baku was not simply another difficult career for Ferrari. It was a silent but devastating warning of everything that is not yet working in Maranello. What happened with Lewis Hamilton, the silence by radio, the diffuse tactical decisions, the structural weaknesses of the car, was not a product of chance or an isolated bad weekend. It was the symptom of a deeper systemic problem. One that has been taking place under the surface of one of the most legendary teams in history. Hamilton's arrival should mark a before and after for Ferrari. Not only because of its talent at the wheel, but for what it represents. A winning mentality, a constant demand for excellence, and an experience that has been shaped by more than a decade of triumphs, defeats, and reinventions at the highest level of motor racing. Lewis did not arrive in Maranello just to pilot. He arrived to transform. But that transformation can only happen if the structure that surrounds it is willing to evolve with it. Fault communication in classification was not a punctual error. It reflects an internal culture where decisions still go through too many filters, where the pilot's voice does not always have a direct line with whom they can immediately influence performance. The tactical indecision in the race, not issuing a clear team order, not only compromised the strategy. He presented institutional fear to alter internal hierarchies that, in a winning team, should be dynamic, not static. And the technical behavior of the SF25 showed that Ferrari has not yet developed a truly robust car, one that adapts with demanding conditions such as those presented by Baku. Hamilton, meanwhile, also faces an adaptation process. It is not enough to get experienced. It must be molded to a car that is not as intuitive as the one left in Brackley. But what is required goes beyond the technical. You have to act as a catalyst for a cultural change. Because if Ferrari wants to be a champion team again, he needs much more than a competitive car and fast pilots. It needs unity, tactical clarity, and above all, organizational conviction. What was seen in Baku is precisely the opposite. A team that still doubts itself, that still hesitates in the key moments, which still protects internal structures above track performance. And in Formula One, that lack of decision costs caro. It costs positions. It costs titles. It costs the trust of the pilots themselves. Hamilton's eighth should not be analyzed only because of its impact on the points table. His true weight is in what he revealed. The distance between the level that Ferrari wants to reach and the point where he really is. A distance that is not shortened with new pieces or simulations in Maranello.